It was just another Monday morning. That's how they always start, right? The worst days of your life, they never announce themselves. They creep in, disguised as ordinary moments, until everything shatters. I remember every detail of that morning. The weight of my phone in my hand. The gentle blue glow of the screen in my dimly lit kitchen. The sound of Minji coughing from her bedroom. My daughter. My entire world. Sick at home with Mrs. Rodriguez while I headed to a job that barely paid enough to keep us afloat in this merciless city. A job where I was always the outsider. The Korean guy. The one with the accent. The single dad who couldn't stay late because he had responsibilities that apparently no one else could understand. My fingers typed out the familiar characters without thinking. I love you. 3 simple words I texted Minji every morning since her mother died. 3 words that kept us connected across the distance. 3 words that were about to destroy everything I'd worked for. 1 second of distraction. 1 careless thumb tap. That's all it took. The message didn't go to Minji. It went to Laura Bennett, Billionaire CEO of Horizon Technologies. My direct boss. A woman known for firing executives who showed up 2 minutes late to meetings. A woman who had never once acknowledged my existence in the 3 years I'd worked at her company. Before I could process what had happened, before I could even think about damage control, my screen flashed with her response. Translation: my stomach didn't just drop. It plummeted through the floor, through the foundation of our apartment building, through the very earth itself. In that moment, I could feel everything I'd built since coming to America beginning to crumble. I didn't delete the message. I didn't respond. What could I possibly say? Sorry. That Korean declaration of love was meant for my daughter? Would she even believe me? Would anyone? The train ride to work was agony. Every stop, every lurch of the car, every announcement over the speaker. They all seemed to mock me. 30 minutes of pure, distilled dread as I rehearsed explanations, apologies, resignation letters in my head. Because that's what immigrants do. Isn't it? We prepare for the worst. We expect to be misunderstood. We know that one mistake can cost us everything. The office was its usual hive of activity when I arrived. The sleek open floor plan that Americans love so much, where privacy goes to die and every conversation becomes public property. I kept my head down as I walked to my desk, feeling eyes track my movement across the floor. Did they know already? Had she told someone? Was I already the punchline of some joke I hadn't heard yet? I had barely logged into my computer when I heard it. The distinctive ping of the executive elevator. The sudden hush that fell over the office like a blanket of snow. The sharp click of heels against polished concrete floors. Laura Bennett never came to our floor before noon. Never. It was an unwritten rule, almost a superstition among the staff. Mornings were safe. Mornings were sacred. Until that day. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. But I could feel her presence moving across the floor, cutting through conversations, commanding attention without saying a word. The clicking grew louder, closer, then stopped. Right behind me, the perfume hit me first. Something expensive and subtle. Not floral or sweet, but complex and assertive, like its wearer. Then came the silence, so complete I could hear the air conditioning humming through the vents. I could feel 40 pairs of eyes burning into my back, watching, waiting. When she spoke, her voice was low, controlled, deliberate. Mr. Park. I turned slowly, my chair creaking in protest. Laura Bennett stood beside my desk, 5 feet 10 inches of immaculate power in a tailored black suit. Her gold earrings caught the light as she tilted her head. Those eyes, dark and penetrating, studied me like I was a complicated piece of code with an error she couldn't quite locate. Ms. Bennett, I managed to say, my accent suddenly thicker under pressure, the way it always got when I was nervous. Another betrayal from my own body. She leaned down then, close enough that no one else could hear, close enough that I could see the flecks of amber in her eyes, close enough that everyone watching would have something to talk about for weeks. Repeat yourself, she whispered. Not what did that message mean? Not was that inappropriate text meant for me? Just repeat yourself. As if she was daring me, testing me. My throat closed. My palms went slick with sweat. The fluorescent lights suddenly seemed too bright, too harsh. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't think of anything except Minji at home with her fever, and the 6 months of savings in my account that wouldn't be enough if I lost this job. The crushing weight of being someone's everything, their provider, protector, parent, pressed down on me until I thought my spine might snap. Laura straightened, adjusting the cuff of her sleeve. "My office. 4 o'clock," she said, loud enough for nearby ears to catch. Then she was gone, striding back toward the elevator, leaving destruction in her wake like some corporate hurricane. The whispers began before she even reached the elevator. I faced discrimination before. The sidelong glances when I speak Korean to Minji in public. The exaggerated surprise when my English is fluent. The way people repeat themselves unnecessarily or speak louder, as if volume will bridge the cultural gap they assume exists. But this was something new. This was like being dissected alive. Trevor Reynolds was the first to strike. He didn't waste any time. Barely waited for Laura to disappear before slithering over to my desk, his designer shoes squeaking slightly against the floor. Trevor. Yale MBA, third-generation wealth, the kind of American who believes his success is entirely self-made despite the silver spoon permanently lodged in his mouth. "So, Jean Ho," he said, drawing out my name with mock familiarity. "What was that about? Private meeting with the big boss?" His smile never reached his eyes. It never did. "Work-related," I said, turning back to my computer. The lie tasted bitter. "Sure it is," Trevor smirked, perching on the edge of my desk uninvited. "You know, some of us have been trying to get FaceTime with Laura for months. Yet here you are, getting personal visits and private meetings. Interesting coincidence, wouldn't you say?" The implication hung in the air between us, ugly and poisonous. I said nothing, my jaw clenched so tight I could feel a headache beginning to pulse at my temples. "Must be nice having the CEO's special attention," he continued, raising his voice just enough to ensure others would hear. "Some of us actually earned our positions the American way. The American way. As if I hadn't worked twice as hard for half the recognition since arriving in this country. As if my engineering degree and years of experience were charity tokens handed to me for diversity points. As if being a widowed immigrant raising a child alone while navigating a foreign culture was somehow the easy path. The rage that surged through me was sudden and violent. In Korea, I would never have spoken to a colleague with such disrespect. I would never have implied something so crude about someone's professional relationships. The difference in workplace cultures had never felt so stark, so jarring. But I said nothing, did nothing, because immigrants learn early, your anger is not allowed. Your pain is not welcome. Your dignity is a luxury you cannot always afford when you have mouths to feed. So I swallowed it down, that burning coal of rage and humiliation, and let it settle in my stomach where it could slowly burn a hole through me. By lunchtime, the rumors had metastasized. I could feel them spreading through the office like a virus, mutating, growing stronger with each retelling. I sat alone in the break room, mechanically eating the kimbap I'd prepared at 5:30 that morning while Minji still slept. The conversation at the table behind me cut off abruptly when I entered, then resumed in theatrical whispers. Korean guy. Texting the CEO. Probably trying to sleep his way up. She actually went to his desk. Each fragment reached me as intended. Each word a small blade sliding between my ribs with surgical precision. Americans have elevated gossip to an art form, I've noticed. The casual cruelty, the plausible deniability, the performance of concern that masks the hunger for someone else's downfall. I checked my phone. A text from Mrs. Rodriguez. Minji's fever is down. She ate a little soup. Asking when Dad is coming home. Home. The word hit me like a physical blow. Our small 2-bedroom apartment wasn't much by American standards. The paint was peeling in the bathroom. The kitchen appliances were older than Minji. The neighbors argued loudly in Spanish at all hours. But it was ours. It was safe. It was the place where Minji didn't have to straddle cultures. Where she could be fully herself. Where the ghost of her mother still lingered in the small altar I maintained in the corner of our living room. I texted back, "Tell her I'll be home by 7. Thank you." I didn't mention the 4 p.m. meeting with Laura. Didn't voice my fear that I might be coming home unemployed. Some burdens you don't share, even with kind neighbors who watch your child when she's sick. I'd barely put my phone down when an email notification appeared on my screen. The quarterly project review had been moved up. Instead of next week, it was happening today. In 30 minutes. With Trevor leading the discussion. The universe has a cruel sense of humor sometimes. The conference room was already half full when I arrived, printouts of my project specs clutched in my sweating hand. Trevor stood at the front, talking animatedly to our department head, his body language radiating confidence and ease. He glanced up when I entered, a flash of something predatory crossing his face before he masked it with professional courtesy. "Ah, Jin-ho, just in time. We were just discussing some concerns about your section of the project." Of course they were. I took a seat as Trevor launched into his presentation, my stomach churning with dread. I'd worked on this project for months. Logged extra hours, debugged critical sections, improved performance metrics across the board. The code was solid. I knew it was solid. But Trevor knew something I didn't fully appreciate until that moment. In America, perception often matters more than reality. Style over substance. Confidence over competence. And he had weaponized this cultural insight against me with surgical precision. If you look at page 17 of Jin-ho's documentation, Trevor was saying, his voice laden with false concern, you'll notice some inconsistencies in the approach. The methodology seems unconventional. Unconventional. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Like foreign. Like not one of us. I'm not saying it doesn't work, he continued magnanimously. Just that it introduces unnecessary complexity. It's not how we typically do things here at Horizon. Here, at Horizon. In America, the subtext was deafening. I opened my mouth to defend my work, to explain that my approach actually simplified the process, that the benchmarks proved it was faster, more efficient. But Trevor smoothly cut me off, moving to the next slide before I could speak. For 20 excruciating minutes, he systematically dismantled my contribution, highlighting minor issues while ignoring major improvements, questioning decisions without allowing me to explain my reasoning. All with the same concerned expression, as if he were genuinely trying to help rather than destroy. By the time the review ended, my professional reputation lay in tatters. Colleagues who had previously respected my work now looked at me with doubt. My department head made notes about revisiting my section of the project. And Trevor looked like a man who had identified a problem and heroically brought it to light. I walked back to my desk in a fog, the familiar weight of being misunderstood, of being other, pressing down on me until it was hard to breathe. This wasn't just about the text anymore. This was about belonging, about worthiness, about whether there was really a place for someone like me in this glass and steel American dream. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I opened it with trepidation. Playing the immigrant card with the CEO? Everyone knows. Pathetic. I stared at the screen, my hand trembling slightly. Anonymous harassment now. The final indignity. I deleted the message, set my phone face down, and tried to focus on fixing the issues Trevor had so helpfully identified in my work. But the characters on my screen blurred and shifted as hot tears of frustration pressed against my eyelids. I didn't cry. Men don't cry in Korean culture. Fathers definitely don't cry. But God, how I wanted to in that moment. How I wanted to scream, to rage, to demand justice in a language that would never sound authoritative coming from my mouth. Instead, I worked, silently, diligently, the way I always had, the way I'd been taught. Head down, emotions controlled, excellence as my only defense against prejudice. The hours crawled by. 3 o'clock came and went. 3:30. 3:45. Each minute bringing me closer to whatever reckoning awaited in Laura Bennett's office. 3:55. I stood, straightened my tie, and walked to the elevator. I could feel eyes following me, speculation hanging in the air. The corporate vultures were circling, waiting to pick apart whatever remained of my career after this meeting. Laura's executive suite occupied the entire top floor of the building. I'd never been there before. Few people below VP level ever had. The elevator required a special key card to access it. One that had been messengered to my desk 20 minutes earlier without explanation. The doors opened onto a reception area that was more art gallery than office. Minimalist furniture, abstract sculptures, floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city. A city that had never really felt like mine, even after 3 years. A city that Minji called home because she knew no other, but that still felt foreign to me in ways I couldn't articulate. Laura's assistant, a poised woman with silver-streaked hair and impeccable posture, barely glanced up as I approached. "Mr. Park, she's expecting you. Last door on the right." No warmth, no reassurance, no hint of what awaited me, just clinical efficiency, as cold and sleek as the marble floors beneath my feet. The walk down that hallway was the longest of my life. Each step echoed against the hard surfaces, announcing my approach like a countdown to execution. I thought about Minji. About how I would explain to an 8-year-old that we might have to move again, start over again, because Daddy made a mistake. Because Daddy didn't fit in. Because Daddy couldn't navigate the invisible rules that seemed so obvious to everyone else. Laura's office door was open. She sat behind a glass desk that looked like it was floating above the skyline, the late afternoon sun casting her in silhouette. Power positioning. She knew exactly what she was doing. "Mr. Park," she said without looking up from her tablet. "Close the door and take a seat." I did as instructed, lowering myself into a chair that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The door clicked shut with a finality that made my pulse quicken. Laura set aside her tablet and looked at me directly. Her gaze was evaluative, unreadable. "You've been with Horizon for 3 years now." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. "Your performance records are consistently above average. You meet deadlines. You solve problems efficiently. You don't engage in office politics." She paused. "Until today." "Ms. Bennett," about the text. She held up a hand, stopping me mid-sentence. "I reviewed your personnel file. You're a widower. You have 1 child, a daughter. You work exactly 40 hours per week. Never more, never less. You haven't taken a sick day in 3 years. You've declined team happy hours and optional company events consistently." Each statement felt like an accusation, though I wasn't sure of what. Being too perfect an employee? Not being social enough? Having a life outside these walls? "The text message," she continued, her voice betraying nothing. "사랑해요. What does it mean exactly?" The Korean characters sounded strange in her mouth, but her pronunciation wasn't terrible. "It means I love you," I said quietly, the shame burning my cheeks despite my innocence. "And it was intended for?" "My daughter, Minji. She's 8. She's home sick today with a fever." The words tumbled out faster than I intended, my accent thickening with emotion. "I text her every morning when I leave for work. I must have. I was distracted and—" "You selected the wrong contact," Laura finished for me, her expression unchanging. "Yes." The single syllable hung between us, pathetically inadequate. Laura studied me for a long moment, her fingers steepled under her chin. I fought the urge to fill the silence, to apologize again, to beg for my job. In Korea, humility would be expected now. Self-deprecation, acknowledgement of my carelessness. But something told me this American woman wouldn't respect such displays. "Are you aware of the rumors circulating about us, Mr. Park?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. "Yes," I admitted. "They started immediately after you came to my desk this morning. Before that, actually." Her voice had an edge now, sharp as a blade. "They started last week when you were assigned to the Nakamura account instead of Trevor Reynolds." I blinked in confusion. "I don't understand." "No, you wouldn't." For the first time, something like emotion flickered across her face. Irritation, perhaps, or disappointment. "You don't engage in office politics, as I mentioned. A commendable quality in theory, but it leaves you vulnerable in practice." She stood abruptly and walked to the window, her back to me as she gazed out at the city. "Trevor Reynolds has been systematically undermining you for months." The text message was simply convenient ammunition. He's been suggesting you received preferential treatment because of your diversity value to the company. The words hit me like physical blows. Not because they were surprising, I'd sensed Trevor's resentment, but because they confirmed my worst fears about how I was seen. Not as a skilled engineer, not as a dedicated employee, but as a token, a diversity checkbox, a Korean name to make the company brochures look more inclusive. I earned my position, I said, my voice tight with suppressed rage. I earned everything I have. Laura turned, and for the first time, I saw something like respect in her eyes. Yes, you did. Your qualifications are impeccable. Your work is excellent. That's why you got the Nakamura account. Because you speak Japanese as well as Korean and English, and because your coding is superior to Reynolds. Not because of some misguided diversity initiative. The validation should have felt good. Instead, it just underscored how completely my achievements had been dismissed and devalued by others. How invisible my efforts had been. How the color of my skin and the aki scent in my voice had somehow negated years of education and experience in the eyes of people like Trevor. The rumors, Laura continued, moving back to her desk, are damaging to both of us. To you, obviously, but also to me and to this company. They suggest I make decisions based on inappropriate personal connections rather than merit. They undermine my authority and judgment. I nodded, understanding completely. This wasn't about me. It was about her. About the company. About American corporate politics and power dynamics I would never fully grasp. I've called an all-staff meeting for tomorrow at 2 p.m., she said, her tone shifting to something harder, colder. I will address this directly, publicly, with consequences for those who continue to spread malicious gossip. The prospect of public humiliation, of having my personal mistake broadcast to the entire company, made my stomach clench. In Korean culture, such public confrontation would be unthinkable. Problems were handled privately, discreetly, with face saved on all sides. But this wasn't Korea. And Laura Bennett wasn't Korean. Is that really necessary? I asked before I could stop myself. Laura's eyebrow arched slightly. Yes, Mr. Park, it is. American workplace culture responds to clear boundaries and public consequences. Gossip thrives in shadows. We're going to drag it into the light and watch it wither. I wanted to protest further, to explain how this would only make me more of an outsider, more of a spectacle. But the set of her jaw told me it would be pointless. The decision was made. Now, she said, her tone softening fractionally. Tell me about your daughter. Minji, was it? The sudden shift disoriented me. Yes, Minji. She's 8. And her mother? Your wife. The familiar ache bloomed in my chest. She died 3 years ago. Cancer. That's why we moved to America. For a fresh start. Laura nodded slowly, something unreadable passing across her face. My father raised me alone after my mother died. I was 10. The revelation was unexpected, personal, a glimpse behind the corporate armor she wore so effectively. It wasn't easy for him, she continued, her gaze distant now. Black man, single father, working 3 jobs in the 1980s. No family support. No understanding from employers when I got sick or had school events. I remained silent, sensing she rarely shared these details, unsure why she was sharing them with me. He never missed a parent-teacher conference. Never missed a doctor's appointment. He worked from 4 a.m. until midnight most days. But somehow, he was always there when it mattered. A ghost of a smile touched her lips before vanishing. People underestimated him constantly. Assumed he couldn't be both provider and nurturer. Assumed his priorities were wrong when he put me first. The parallels weren't subtle. She was seeing her father in me, recognizing a shared struggle across cultural differences. Horizon will be implementing new policies beginning next month, she said, her businesslike tone returning abruptly. Flexible hours for parents. Remote work options for family emergencies. Anti-harassment protocols with actual teeth. I blinked at the sudden shift back to professional matters. That's good. I'd like you to join the committee overseeing these changes. Your perspective would be valuable. It wasn't a request. It was a statement. A declaration of trust, maybe, or at least professional respect. More than that, it was visibility. A seat at a table I hadn't even known existed. I would be honored, I said carefully, still uncertain where this conversation was heading. Laura nodded once, decisively. Good. The meeting is at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Be there early. I stood, recognizing the dismissal. Thank you, Ms. Bennett. She was already looking back at her tablet. Attention shifted elsewhere. But as I reached the door, she spoke again. Mr. Park. I turned. Tell Minji she has a father to be proud of. Not many people have that kind of dedication. The words hit me with unexpected force. Pride from this formidable woman was clearly a rare commodity. But more than that, it was acknowledgement of my struggles, of my sacrifices, of the invisible labor of parenthood that went unrecognized in corporate America. I will, I said, my voice rougher than I intended. Thank you. I left her office with my job intact and something more precious. Dignity. The walk back to the elevator felt different. Lighter. The marble floors no longer cold and unwelcoming but simply floors. The art no longer intimidating but simply art. I had been seen, really seen, perhaps for the first time since arriving in America. The next morning arrived with a weight of anticipation. I dropped Minji at school. Her fever gone but a lingering cough keeping her voice raspy, and headed to the office with a strange sense of calm. Whatever happened at the 2 p.m. meeting, I knew now that my position was secure. That Laura Bennett had seen value in my work, in my perspective, in my difference. The office hummed with speculation when I arrived. Whispered conversations cut off abruptly as I passed. Eyes followed me across the floor. But there was something new in the air, uncertainty. The rumor mill had caught wind of the mandatory meeting, sensed a shift in the winds. The vultures weren't so sure about circling anymore. Trevor avoided me completely, his usual smirk replaced by a tight, nervous expression. He knew something was coming. He just didn't know what. At 1:55, we filed into the main conference room, the entire staff, from senior VPs to maintenance personnel. I took a seat in the middle, neither hiding at the back nor drawing attention at the front. People glanced at me surreptitiously, curiosity evident in their expressions. I kept my face neutral, giving them nothing. At exactly 2 p.m., Laura entered. The room fell silent immediately. She wore a deep red suit, her natural hair styled in a crown of intricate braids, gold earrings catching the light as she moved to the podium. Power personified. Unapologetic black excellence in a world that had tried to deny her a seat at the table. Thank you all for being here, she began, her voice measured and clear. I've called this meeting to address a matter that has come to my attention over the past few days. It concerns workplace culture, professionalism, and the consequences of failing to uphold both. The tension in the room was palpable. No one moved. No one spoke. Barely anyone breathed. There have been rumors, Laura continued, her gaze sweeping the room, regarding my relationship with one of our employees. These rumors are false. They are also damaging, not just to the individuals involved, but to the integrity of this company. She let the words hang in the air for a moment. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I kept my expression carefully neutral. This was her show. I was just a prop in it. I want to be clear, she said, her tone hardening. Gossip, slander, and baseless speculation have no place at Horizon. If I discover that anyone has been deliberately spreading false information about a colleague, that person will be terminated immediately. No warnings, no second chances. I saw Trevor shift uncomfortably in his seat. His usual confidence evaporated. Around the room, people exchanged nervous glances. Laura's message was unmistakable. Professionalism is not optional, she continued. Respect is not negotiable. If you cannot adhere to these standards, you do not belong here. She paused, letting the threat sink in. Then her tone shifted slightly, became more measured. Horizon was founded on principles of innovation, excellence, and inclusion. Real inclusion, not the performative kind that looks good in brochures but changes nothing fundamental. We hire the best talent, regardless of where that talent comes from. We promote based on merit, not politics. We succeed because of our diversity, not in spite of it. The words resonated through the room, challenging some, validating others. I felt a tightness in my throat that had nothing to do with anxiety and everything to do with unexpected validation. As of today, we are implementing new policies regarding workplace conduct, flexible schedules for parents, and anti-harassment protocols. Details will be emailed this afternoon. A committee has been formed to oversee these changes. Her gaze found me briefly in the crowd. Mr. Park will be leading this committee. Those who have been selected to serve should check their email for meeting times. The ripple of surprise was almost audible. Trevor's head snapped in my direction, disbelief written across his features. Others looked confused, curious, reassessing. In one masterful stroke, Laura had transformed me from victim to authority figure, from outsider to insider, from subject of gossip to enforcer of rules. That will be all, Laura concluded, stepping away from the podium. Please return to your work with a renewed commitment to the values that make Horizon exceptional. She left without another word, the click of her heels against the floor punctuating her exit. For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly, people began to stand, to file out, to process what had just happened. I remained seated, letting the crowd thin before I stood. A few people nodded to me as they passed. Others avoided my gaze. Trevor was among the first to flee, his face flushed with anger or embarrassment or both. When the room had emptied, I finally stood and walked back to my desk. The atmosphere had shifted. The whispers had stopped. The stares had ceased. Something fundamental had changed, not just in how others saw me, but in how I saw myself in this American corporate landscape. 2 weeks later, the new policies were fully implemented. Trevor had been transferred to another department. A lateral move that was punishment disguised as opportunity. The committee I led had already made substantial recommendations about flexible scheduling and remote work options, most of which Laura approved without revision. More importantly, I could now leave at 3 p.m. twice a week to take Minji to her checkups, making up the hours remotely after she went to bed. I could work from home when she was sick. I could attend her school events without apologizing or explaining or feeling like I was failing as an employee because I refused to fail as a father. The text that had almost destroyed my career had, ironically, transformed it instead. Not because Laura Bennett had a soft spot for immigrant single fathers. Not because she felt sorry for me, but because she recognized value where others saw only difference. Because she understood that diversity wasn't just about hiring people who looked different, but about changing systems to accommodate different needs, different perspectives, different strengths. One evening, as Minji and I ate dinner in our small apartment, she looked up from her plate with those serious eyes that sometimes made her seem older than her years. Appa, are you happy here in America? The question caught me off guard. Children see more than we give them credit for. Feel more. Understand more. Minji had witnessed my struggle to belong, to provide, to navigate a culture that often seemed determined to remind me I was an outsider. Why do you ask? I deflected, buying time. She shrugged, pushing rice around with her fork. You don't look sad anymore when you come home from work. The observation was so simple, so accurate, it momentarily robbed me of words. Had I been sad before? Yes. Bone deep, soul-weary sad. The kind of sadness that comes from constantly swimming against the current, from never quite fitting in, from having your worth questioned daily in 1,000 small ways. I'm happy, I told her, and realized with surprise that it was true. Not perfectly happy. Not without struggles or doubts or moments of alienation. But fundamentally content in a way I hadn't been since before her mother died. Since before cancer and grief and immigration had reshaped our lives. Minji smiled, revealing the gap where she'd lost her front tooth last week. Me too. I like my school. And Mrs. Rodriguez. And my friends. Simple joys. Uncomplicated happiness. The kind children can access so easily and adults forget how to find. That night, after tucking Minji in, I sat on our small balcony overlooking the city lights. America sprawled before me, beautiful, flawed, contradictory, challenging. Still not entirely mine, perhaps, but no longer quite so foreign either. I took out my phone and carefully, deliberately texted Minji, who was already asleep in the next room. "Saranghae, good night, my little star." It was a message for tomorrow morning. A reminder that some connections transcend distance, transcend language, transcend cultural differences. That love, simple, unconditional, unwavering, is perhaps the only universal language any of us truly need to master. In the morning, I would go to work. I would lead meetings. I would write code. I would navigate office politics with new awareness, new confidence. I would occupy space I had earned through merit rather than apologizing for space I feared I had been given through tokenism. And I would remember what Laura Bennett had taught me, perhaps without intending to, that sometimes the most revolutionary act isn't fighting the system from the outside, but changing it from within. That sometimes belonging doesn't mean erasing difference but insisting that difference be acknowledged, respected, valued. That sometimes an accidental text can change everything.